We are live streaming. 3, 2, 1.
Tonight is Wednesday, August 25th, and this is the HHCSD Board of Education meeting. We please all rise for the pledge.
United States of America.
So the board is now our executive session and our next public session. Can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Does anybody have anything pulled from the consent agenda? I would like to pull item 2.4. Professional personnel, 3 for the. All right, so can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda, please? All in favor? All right, so we have one item for the consent agenda, and that is item 3.4, the professional personnel agenda -3, payments for other compensation. Yeah, I wanted to know if we can describe a little bit the mentor position.
Yeah, so school districts in New York State a number of years ago were directed to build a mentoring program for all new teachers to the district, new to the profession, and new to the district. I have to get back to you on what year it was, but basically the premise was for existing teachers in the district to mentor the new folks and give them an opportunity to understand sort of the ropes of the school district from the campus. Sick day, lesson planning, health insurance paperwork, some of the nuts and bolts, all the way to curriculum, that's curriculum practices, instructional strategies, co-teaching with them in terms of lesson management or new expectations. So they're really peer to peer. It's not an administrator that is in supervisory capacity working with the teacher. It really is intended to be peer to peer. To do so, we host for mentors, we interview the mentors, they go through a process to be qualified and then ultimately will be done. We also have a teacher, a mentor coordinator that is our liaison for folks in New York State to make sure that they are going through all the latest requirements and so on and so forth, and fill out the report. So it's a really exciting initiative to really handhold, I guess, our newer teachers all the way through their first 3 or 4 years of our system, and works with them on their professional portfolio, which is something that the board will have access to each spring. The board reviews privately teacher portfolios, gives you an opportunity to develop a kind of a relationship with them.
Agenda item 3.4-3. A second. All in favor? All right, so that brings us to our.
Yes, it is back to school planning. We didn't think in May or June we would be back here, but inevitably we are. Earlier today, around noon, I sent an email to our community. We also put it online and on our website, giving the latest outline of Governor Kathy Hochul and what her expectations are for all schools in New York State. This has been an interesting summer. Last year, as you remember, New York State came out with guidance in July. Governor came out with additional guidance, the former governor, on August 7th, and we certainly had much more time to build our school system around what we demanded. There were executive orders from the health department, executive orders from the governor's office, executive orders from the state education. In late July this year, the governor, through the commissioner of the New York State Department of Health, basically said there will be no guidance from any New York State agency because all of the executive orders that governed all school districts last year expired, they sunset. And the state said they, at that time, had no intention to reauthorize those executive orders. That's when people started to go a little crazy because we were moving the school year to start in September and October the way that we ended. We ended with masks were indoors, but not outdoors. Throughout the year last year, there were changes in athletic season. Those changes were based on infection rate as well as what those sports were. And the physical contact that they endured. Social distancing moved from 6 feet to 3 feet. We were able to exercise some user restrictions in terms of music and present. All that were governed by the governor, health department. 2 weeks ago, yesterday, when the previous governor indicated his resignation, that the current governor, Kathy Hochul, would take over, she indicated that she would, either by executive order or by directing the health department, that she would, she signaled that she would be making some statewide decisions for all schools. Those decisions were communicated a little bit yesterday, and that's what I shared with our families. Anyone in a school, public or private, will need to be masked. The governor also said that she is determining how best to increase the level of vaccination among all school staff as well as students. Right now, it is not possible or legal to mandate vaccinations for children or for staff in public schools. She's trying to find a way to either make that happen or to increase the percentage of students and staff that are vaccinated. And she's also going to use some federal and state money to try to increase the amount of COVID testing for staff and students so that districts could have quicker data on who is infected and, of course, who is not infected, because the infection rate in combination with the percentage of folks vaccinated is really what the incoming governor has indicated or signaled would drive some of the public policy. For example, 3 feet of social distancing, reduce social distancing, or mask wearing, as we said earlier, outside. So we have communicated with everybody what we know and what we can implement. We have been signaling that. The governor had been signaling that to schools for the last couple of weeks, and we've been sharing that. We've been sharing that with our community. So here's what we do know, and again, not to read the email, but want to make sure we're crystal clear. We will have educational programs every day for all students. Schools will follow their schedules pre-COVID, so dating back to the 1920 school year. You may remember, for those of you who had middle schoolers or high schoolers last year, we had to shorten the school day to accommodate for screening. Screening is not mandated this year, and it sounds like the governor is going to try to increase the number of tests available as opposed to screening. Well, certainly that was an extra mitigation layer. I think it was universal feedback from school districts across the state that the screening really didn't have an impact on containing or stopping the spread of the virus. And families who were filling out the screener, I'm sure, driving your child to school or putting it on the bus, and you remember getting the screener hours later. 3 feet of social distancing in classrooms. Where possible, we're going to try to achieve 6 feet of social distancing. And we'll talk about that in a minute in terms of all of the dominoes that are connected with that task. As we said earlier, masks indoors regardless of your vaccination status. Students who are quarantined by law are eligible to receive instruction. We will be able to provide digital instruction to those students who are quarantining. For now, back to school events will be held virtually until we receive more guidance. In this case, it will be the health department. We're going to try to use the outdoors of schools to the greatest extent possible. We had music practicing outside, Gazette outside, students eating outside, mask breaks will continue to take place outside as we did last year. Now that the governor has made this signal, the health department, the county health department, is charged with rules and regulations for public entities in Westchester County in terms of guidelines for contact tracing and guidelines for quarantine. That's a county health department function. We meet as superintendents in our region. We meet with the county executive and the health department every single Monday to talk about these issues. And the county health department wanted to wait until the governor first was sworn in. Second, made her signal public, as she did yesterday at 3 o'clock, before they started complementing her vision in terms of health department regulations. This coming school year, in terms of quarantining and in terms of related issues with contact tracing, is going to be different. And the reason it's going to be different is because of the vaccination status of staff and students. We have a guess of what the health department was considering weeks ago. That was before the incoming governor, that was before the previous governor resigned and our current governor was sworn in. But it would not surprise me that the quarantining and the contact tracing process will be different based on your vaccination status. In fact, it's almost a guarantee that it will also be different based on your social distance. Last year, we were quarantining large swaths of students because they were generally eating lunch at the classroom. We're talking about elementary students. We have been told that the health department is going to be a little more specific about quarantining as well as contact tracing while students are eating. Because of the infection rate and also because of vaccination, particularly those who are 12 years of age and older. So the governor yesterday said that she will have more information for us by the end of the week, so that's in the next 2 days. The health department probably will complement that with their requirements for quarantine and contact tracing. We'll share that as soon as we have. The health department has not approved any plan for the school year with regards to quarantine and contact tracing. That is their responsibility. I don't mean their responsibility from, we don't want to do it, it's their responsibility to do it. They are the only ones, the county health department and New York State Health Department, that can quarantine, direct people to quarantine. We assisted them last year and did 99% of the work, but we were communicating or we were giving quarantine orders to staff and to students based on the criteria set forth by the health department. We had to give contact information to the health department and the contact tracers. Sometimes they followed up, other times they didn't, but that was their responsibility. Anyone who tests positive that we knew about in school, we reported that to the health department. They reported it to the state. We had to identify all of the folks that were in close contact. We had a question or we weren't really sure about a particular situation. We had a hotline to speak with members of the Westchester County Department of Health, and they walked us through the decision-making tree, and it was never the same, right? And we heard about that last year, that, well, you know, if one student showed up to BB who was positive and another at Ernest Woods that was positive, why were more kids or less kids quarantined, so on and so forth. The calculation that the county health department had to take into account is very, very specific. Liz Gillio, our transportation director, was watching videos of how long students were on a bus to see if they met the 10-minute because that was a requirement last year. Teachers and principals had seating charts for lunch, for all of the classes, so on and so forth. You'll remember that elementary students basically didn't leave their classroom last year because we wanted to try to control, the recommendation was to control the spread and not get kids in halls and small spaces, so on and so forth. So the health department is committed that they will give us their requirements for school districts to help enforce, but it's super important that I remind everyone, quarantine requirements, contact tracing is the function of the health department, and last year we assisted them with it. We certainly earned our badge of stripes to be deputized health department officials, but they and only they can come up with those guidelines, and that becomes basically the law until they revise us. What has made this a little confusing, or perhaps annoying, I would say, is that there are other counties in the state whose health department came out in front of the governor's comments and made their decisions, and schools were able to communicate information about quarantining and contact tracing weeks ago. They now are going to have to revisit that based on what the governor has signaled that she's going to make. So I've said to people that the beginning of our school year is going to look more like the end of last school year rather than the beginning of last school year. We're meeting with our elementary principals tomorrow. I know of at least 2 of the schools they've sent out for back to school information. They're having orientations next week, next Tuesday and Wednesday. At those orientations, they'll provide parents and plans for lunch. We're hopeful that all students will be able to eat lunch in cafeterias, but the goal is for students to eat lunch in cafeterias and be 6 feet apart. Because if they're within 6 feet apart, maskless, eating lunch, and someone tests positive, we now need to contact trace everyone within 6 feet, or sometimes within 6 feet of that child. So we're trying to create the environment up front that will mitigate the need for contact tracing and for many students to be quarantined. Last year, it really wasn't. It wasn't feasible. Students were eating in classrooms, and the requirements back then were different. But we're able to achieve 3 feet of social distancing in all of the classrooms. We did use some of our federal funding to retain and hire some additional teachers at elementary to bring the large class sections down. So we got fewer kids in the classroom. So we certainly did more than achieve 3 feet social distancing. Back at the high school, they'll be back to the normal schedule. Last year, they had a dedicated lunch period for the entire school. They'll be back to their 3 or 4 periods of lunch. So you take the high school, around 700 kids, divided by 3 or 4 lunch periods. We're able to spread them out here. We'll probably also use the dome or other spaces to make sure they can at least be 6 feet apart. That's what we know, and I certainly feel and appreciate the frustration because at least last year, as crazy as last year was, a lot of those decisions were made, and we were given some runway to adapt and adjust. But the health department and being echoed by the former governor at the end of July saying the pandemic is over in the sense of the executive orders that expired was really a shock, because that was not, we intended to open the school year the way we ended based on those policies and protocols, but the executive order was suspended. And not only was it suspended, the legislature took back the ability for the former governor and any future governor to make certain executive orders around health and safety. So Kathy Hochul has an interesting dilemma here, because the language was very clear. She was directing the health department to make some of those decisions rather than those decisions being executive order. And that is because of some of the legislative maneuvering that happened in spring as a result of the pandemic. So The moment we get information, we try to share it with families. We try to get the information out there. After we process it, we consult with our attorneys, we consult with the health department, we consult with our safety consultants, we consult with the New York State School Boards Association, Superintendent's Council, with a lot of different agencies to make sure a number of things. That we heard everything the same way, that everyone is responding in similar fashion based on the resources they have, and that no one is knowingly building a plan for a school year that doesn't meet the criteria. So that was a big update for many people. They either heard that before, they read that before, but school districts we're all in the same spot. There were some districts that came out very bold and aggressive a number of weeks ago or months ago, and they now are changing their plans. For example, there were schools in the Buffalo area, I think it was Erie County or maybe Niagara County, created different criteria for returning to school, and now the governor's comments and what's anticipated out of the executive side of the House and the Department of Health, they now are changing the plans that they've been spending weeks getting ready to. So if you're frustrated, we appreciate that. This is, we think, or we thought we saw the light at the end of the tunnel. We ended the year and it grew that's the cash compared to the experience that kids and all of our staff had to endure. But this year, as I said, this year we're going to begin in similar fashion to the way we ended, and not as separate and sterile, not from health sterile, but a very sterile opening.
Thanks for being so on top of this, trying to take care of all the details and the community informed. I'm going to go around the table and see if you have questions. And I'll start at the end and then we'll just go all the rest.
I just want to confirm, so 3 foot of social distancing will be maintained in all classrooms, the movers, classrooms are then people that. Correct. And has the county given us any date of when they are prepared to give us their plan?
When we met with them on Monday, they knew the governor was being sworn in Tuesday at 12:01 a.m. and that she had her press conference yesterday at 3 o'clock.
Questions?
I was also consulting with their other county departments of health to see how close they were, how aligned they were. I think the issue the county staff is we're trying to be, rather than a statewide approach, which is the way we opened the year last year. The statewide approach, was the right thing or the wrong thing, I don't know. But the infection rate throughout the state moved wildly. It wasn't the whole state all the time that had an infection. And so throughout last year, the governor and the State Department of Health backed off a little bit and gave more responsibility to the counties based on the county. So what our county has been doing is been working with Rockland and Dutchess and Putnam and the counties on Long Island, because our infection rate has the infection rate in that geographical area over the last 18 months has been more similar than compared to the Adirondacks and Southern Tier. So that's a long-winded answer. It's like I think they're trying to get the metrics right, because I think they want to communicate, here's our plan, and if we achieve lower infection rate by X and then by Y by Z, they want it to be inspiring. Get your vaccine or keep your mask on, or don't do anything that that could spike the infection rate, because here is our pathway to normal. And that really was the signal they gave us on Monday. They didn't just want to say, here are the rules and we'll call you later. They wanted to say, here are the rules and here are the avenues to loosen the restrictions, but the restrictions are going to be loosened based on infection rates.
So testing, I know she said that she's looking to provide some sort of plan for testing. Did she give any indication of what that would mean? Does that mean like there are less pet sites around. So when she.
Yeah, so-
Schools, like,
Yeah, part of her commentary was that they're working with a testing company, and I think like to create the funding flow from the federal government to the state government to using say Rite Aid as an example, where there's a relationship that if students or staff up to Rite Aid to get tested and identify who they are, what school district they go to, all of that information will be reported back to the district in a much more quicker fashion. Last year, for example, I was COVID tested. I had symptoms. I actually had 2 tests. I had a negative saliva test, but because I had symptoms, they highly recommended, and because of my function being around other staff and kids, I had a PCR test, and at that time, in early December, coming off of Thanksgiving and the big spike, it took 5 days to get my results back. So I was sidelined like many staff and many families and students. So the tests have become more accurate. There's more funding now, and so the governor is trying to create a streamlined, partnering with testing companies and partnering with existing pharmacies. The county was on the heels of rolling out a county testing on Monday. They were sharing with us what their vision was and wanted to hold off until what the governor mandated before coming. We as a school organization cannot unilaterally mandate that people get vaccinated or people or students get vaccinated in order to work or in order to come to our schools. That can only be through an order of the governor. And the same thing with testing. Testing would be optional. Now, what I anticipate is that a negative test is going to be a criteria to shorten your quarantine period. That was not the case 12 months ago. It was your quarantine, whether you had symptoms or whether you tested positive or negative. What we believe the county is going to come up with are different criteria that will create a longer or short quarantine period based on, well, are you vaccinated, are you wearing a mask, were you symptomatic, and tested, and what tests you take, when were you tested, and what the results are.
One more. So in the lack of guidance from the state, any guidance within schools is made by their administrators, such as, I guess cafeterias or lunchrooms seem like it would be something that would be guided from state, we're thinking, or from health department.
Yeah, the goal is to not create an environment that will, create an environment based on the criteria that would limit the possible spread, to mitigate the spread, and would certainly mitigate people being out of school by way of being contact. Yeah.
So one-way hallways, those items are more from the lockers, and those are more like school-bound guidances, like that.
Yeah,
That's
so-
how you envision it?
Yeah, so last year, we tried to control traffic flow and not have people passing each other. Because remember, a year ago, we were really nervous about saliva and people talking to each other, and also trust, to make sure that we were able to manage and supervise the environment. Same thing with lockers, especially at the middle school and the high school level. Last year's backpack, if you have middle school or high school, became a power cord, a laptop, and something to write with and write on. They weren't slugging around, the big 30-pound textbooks from all of their classes. So that was to control and limit exposure in short and small places, because if Allie and I had a locker next to each other, and I tested positive, she would contact trace. That's just one more thing that we would need to consider, or one more potential person who could have been infected, or even if not infected, we were within proximity, we met all the criteria for her to be quarantined. So a lot of those strategies were mitigation strategies that were recommended by the CDC to really keep people away and apart, so that we mitigate the spread.
I think my first question is the guidance or the mandate that's going to come from the state on the mask wearing, is there anything that they're going to give us or direction they're going to give the districts on what this looks like for our children with special needs or medical conditions? Is it going to be a blanket statement and then you have to make accommodations for somebody who?
Yeah, so if it's similar to last year, they came out first, they said a mask, and then it was face covering. They got a little more specific. We had kids with gators, the gators, the little things. And they were getting a little more specific. We did have, I believe, some students for many different reasons that I won't get into, didn't wear masks, but they had other mitigating apparatus, whether they were shields or whether they wrapped around or other things. So yes, we accommodate them. We would in a non-COVID, non-pandemic year that involves the child pediatricians. They send us information, we check it out with our school doctor, and we need to approve any accommodations, that's something.
So where would a parent go for that? Is there a certain
They
person?
start with their doctor.
No, I mean in our district.
Well, they would start with their principal, and the principal would likely send it to the office of.
Okay, cool, awesome. So just to kind of reiterate, so quarantine rules, means all that is in the works in a few days. Hopefully we'll know and we'll clearly be spelling that out to people on what to expect for the following week when school begins.
Yes, and only the Department of Health can make that work.
And you had mentioned that there would be digital instruction for the children that are quarantined. What does that look like? Is that something that?
Yeah, so last year, our middle school and high school model was a hybrid model where if you were at home, because again, at the enrollment half, to try to mitigate the spread, all of those mitigating factors. If you were at home, whether it was not your time to come to school or you were quarantined, you could, Zoom in. You didn't use Zoom, but that was just what we called it, Zoom in. So we were able to improve that functionality in our middle school and high school. At the elementary level, if you were quarantined, we provided the classroom teacher with release time to check in with those kids that were quarantined throughout the day. We tried to check it with them for at least an hour. Sometimes it was more, but it was beginning of the day, midday, end of the day. That's a discussion we're having with the elementary principals tomorrow. There's also the potential that we may need to use existing staff as not remote teachers. We're not permitted to have a full remote model, but to be dedicated to really be tutors and a conduit between the classroom teacher and kids that are informed. The most efficient way is for the classroom teacher to keep checking in, because it's much harder at the elementary level to be teaching two groups of kids at once. Attention span, just a function of the curriculum, the need to have more eyes and ears on the kids in front of you than perhaps at the secondary level. And it was easier at the secondary level last year because by April, I shouldn't say that, maybe by February through the rest of the year, we were hovering around 30% of school attendance. So oftentimes a teacher only had a handful of kids in front of them, so that supervision wasn't an issue. But that's also being started.
Of course, so what about the family that's doing the right thing and their kid is symptomatic, they're not mandated to be quarantined, but their family's doing the right thing? Will they have access to instruction?
If
Their kid is symptomatic and they're waiting, they're pending testing, or they're just gonna wait the day out to see.
if they're part of a quarantine order, yes.
But if a parent just because they're getting home sick, they're not.
Yeah, that's a slippery slope. And that's a conversation we're going to have tomorrow, because to be honest, that's what happened last year. What happened last year with the hybrid model in middle school and high school was it easily became an option to come to school rather than an expectation. And we got to a point where, I'm saying middle schools and high schools in the region said they're online, they're engaged, they're present, and it counts, right? It counts. That permission, all of those permissions go back to what I said earlier, expire and renewed. So if the governor of the state education department says otherwise and says school districts must provide, then absolutely you must. But that's the slippery slope.
What if they were exposed outside of our school setting? What if they were exposed at church? What if they just weren't doing it?
If they were exposed and there was, and contact tracing took place and the Department of Health was notified, we then would be notified that so-and-so has a quarantine. So we did ask kids, we asked kids staff to produce your quarantine. And there is a quarantine order, it's adapted.
This summer, because the testing, had to get
Do you agree with that?
by the time it's
Thank you. Yeah, no, for sure. So one other thing that I think is really important for the public to understand is, I think most people are under the assumption that a board gets together and talks about what the school year is gonna look like and how COVID is impacting it. And I think it's important that people understand that us sitting here are not sitting down saying, every kid's gonna wear a mask, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that. And obviously everyone knows now that the governor is implementing that, but let's pretend she did not. In our district, it's the superintendent and the administration that makes the calls based on the recommendations that are coming to them from multiple resources? Or is it the board that comes together and figures out what the school year would look like in regards to a health situation like this?
It depends. And the reason it depends is it's around whether it's educational policy or public health policy. So if our board wanted to, let's go back 3 years ago. The board wanted to implement masks just as a super duper safety precaution, not knowing anything we know now. The board could do that. And the way the board would do that is through amending existing policies that, I'm going to sound crazy, and I don't mean to, but that the board would implement basically uniform policy, a face covering uniform policy. And we would have to go through the process of making that policy. We would have public meetings, we would get public input, and then have it. So there is an avenue. Probably wouldn't be popular, but yes, there is an avenue based on, again, I'm sort of being cute about it, but going back to it depends. It depends what the urgency is that's creating the policy. You have policies that are, we have policies that are mandated by the federal or state government, and then you have some forced choice policies, you have to pick one or the other, and then you have free choice policies. So it really would determine what category those fit in. And before we adopt any policy, we make sure if it's a medical policy that our medical director reviews, or any other policy that our legal counsel does.
And I think the last thing on my list was just if you could, because until Carol shared with me, I wasn't aware, what's going on with athletics in regards to COVID? If you're not a high school parent, you might not have gotten the update.
Yeah, so we actually put those updates online. I think they're online now. I didn't check. But until further notice, we're using last year's rules in terms of high-risk sports and not high-risk. You remember last year, all of the athletic seasons got delayed and then therefore truncated because at that time, the state education department and health department wanted to track the infection rate, and they also just wanted to study whether or not kids should be wearing a mask and playing football. Should they be wearing a mask and playing soccer, so on and so forth. So about that time. We were instructed by the New York State Athletic Association, as well as the County Department of Health. The County Department of Health got involved last year with high-risk athletics. The governor put it on the County Departments of Health, was to begin at least the practice season, which for us began on Monday, under last year's guidelines, and we expect new guidelines before that.
So we're like, everybody's playing.
Oh, time, in terms of what a typical, duration of the season.
Awesome. I think that's it. I have two questions. The first is, how are you going to collect vaccination status information?
We can't mandate it, it's, voluntary, submission only. We do have vaccination status of some staff that, took, paid time to get vaccinated last year. And in order for them to use paid time off, the board approved that for every employee. They have to submit proof that they are vaccinated. So we have that data from next year. We're putting a survey together, again, voluntary submission survey of who's been vaccinated since, all of our employees and eventually all of our students. The reason we hit pause on that is because I think there will be a different response rate perhaps to the survey once the county department of health clearly articulates their guidelines for contact tracing and quarantine, because they are going to use that, your vaccination status, as a caveat in terms of what the duration.
So is a parent going to have to prove vaccination status?
No.
Or they just,
No, they're going to say we're vaccinated
and so once they say that, their child does not get caught up in, or potentially not be caught up in quarantine.
not from us, they would be identified. We identified everyone for contact tracing. The contact tracers, when they receive the report, they determine who is or who isn't vaccinated, and then they may follow up. So for our purposes, if we all need to be quarantined because we were eating lunch for 3 hours without masks, within 2 feet of each other, the report would be all of our names and addresses and contact info without indicating vaccination status. And the people on the other side of the health department would follow up and say, this person doesn't need to be quarantined. They're not going to say it's because they're vaccinated. They can't, but that would make me believe that they are.
So are you feeling hopeful that the Department of Health is going to have a quicker turnaround? Because that was a problem last year. They were taking days to follow
Because
up.
we were quarantining everyone. Yeah. And vaccination status, I think, is going to result in a shorter quarantine period. And that's why the governor indicated yesterday she'd like to mandate that to speed up the process. That's not a popular take with some people. For me, responsible for 2,300 kids and 1,000 staff, I like that because that will quicken up the process and will keep more kids and more staff.
That's what let's begin with.
Yep.
And then my last question is, for parents and community members that want more information, that have specific questions either about their school or about policies or decisions regarding anything, how and where and whom should they
Yeah,
contact?
so we're finalizing an FAQ. For those of you who looked at our FAQ from last year, it was pages long. Really good information, but we're culling through that and basically deleting what's no longer relevant. So we'll have new updated information. Once we get all of our info from the governor and the county, I'll probably do some Q&A forums after we push that information out.
Over Zoom?
Yeah, probably Zoom or Google Meet or what have you. We'll have the FAQ out. We've re-upped the COVID email that if your child does test positive, there's a dedicated email per school that goes to personnel. And last year we have on our website the Just Ask button, which is a way that people can click one button, identify the topic that they have a question, type it in a box and hit send, and that gets directed to various personnel. Shows up as an email.
And you have some good questions tonight. I think this makes sure it's clear to us that there will be forums for families and things.
Yeah, we'll have, as soon as we have all of our directives and marching orders, I'm sure there are going to be more questions, and I'll make sure myself and other members of the team are available. The elementary schools, they have their orientations next Tuesday and Wednesday, so they'll share, particulars of lunch or what have you, those opportunities, and probably over Zoom. But, to have one now, without all of these answers would, you know, I don't know, and would create frustration. You know, a lot of answers are gonna be, we don't know yet, and that just, you know, perpetuates frustration. But as soon as we have all the information, we will get it out directly, email to parents, put it online. We'll schedule those forms with enough time.
Bill?
Joe, first of all, thank you for all the information you've been providing us. I'm trying to understand how to digest the information that's going to be coming to us going forward. Specifically, and I don't even know if you'll be able to answer it, but hopefully you can. Relating to the governor not being able to give an executive order anymore regarding to health-related rules. Right now, it sounds like the governor is suggesting to the state health department to make some decisions, but yet it's our county health department that's going to be telling us what we can and can't do. And the state health department, the governor can't, sounds like the governor can't dictate to the state health department. Can the state health department dictate to the counties? Okay, so it's not another suggestion. So
Right.
once we get past the governor connection to the state health department can dictate to the entire state.
Yeah.
Okay, so that'll give us some
and they-
consistency.
And they basically, the way it trickles down is they basically deputize the county department of health, forced choice, free choice, no choice, right? And then we become deputies of the county department of health to do the contact tracing, identify, you know, vaccination status, all of that kind of stuff. So it certainly trickles down. Yeah. Now the reason I don't want to get caught up on the executive order piece, but the governor felt it was important to have a number of executive orders issued from public meetings, whether school board meetings or town council or, you know, whoever, the county legislature could meet remotely. That was one executive order. Another executive order was around school funding and other things. The legislature basically, for lack of a better term, stripped him and future governors of their ability to make such widespread executive orders without consent from the Assembly and the Senate. So now the incoming governor has to abide by that. So one of two things would happen. One, she would get the Senate and Assembly's approval to execute her plan, which she's outlined, or she'll tell the health department, the state health department, they will tell the county health department, and it comes down to us. So either way, it will end up on our lap. It's a matter of which fork in the road they take.
It sounds like this will potentially give us more consistency, which neighboring districts are doing different things.
Yes, and that's part of the frustration, is that there are districts throughout the state that said, okay, let's tackle this, and they made very specific and independent decisions for their school communities, and now those are going to be undone because there's going to be a statewide approach. Now, politics got into what motivated Albany to take the powers of executive order away from the governor last year. But that actually was the most efficient communication. I've got to make a decision. Here's the decision. It's uniform. Get going, right? And then we'll revisit it along the way. But that's why the incoming governor, she's our governor now, you know, that's why there appears to be this sort of drip, because she's going to tell someone else to mandate it because she can't mandate it herself.
Thank you.
Had an excellent round of questions and all the questions I had. I just wanted to reiterate one thing that Alexis brought up about the board talking about these issues. This is the board talking about these issues. We don't have secret meetings where we talk about them outside of the meeting. So all of our discussions about health and safety issues have been held here.
It's a lot going on.
All right, so that brings us, I In order to maintain an order of the meeting, the board has established the following guidelines for those wishing to address the board. Each speaker should sign in the district clerk prior to comment. When called, each speaker should step up to the podium and state their name and affiliation if applicable prior to starting their comment. Letters to the written material should be handed to the district clerk. Each speaker is permitted 3 minutes for their comments and must be recognized by the board president. And Anderson will be timing in 3 minutes. And we'll give you a 30-second comment. The board will listen to comments, but will not necessarily debate or discuss items. Operational matters will be directed to the board. The board is not permitted to address personnel or individual student matters in open session. The board may limit repetitive comments in order to give time to others who can speak on other items, as well as to maintain meeting. The board expects comments to be made without interference from the audience in a civil manner. Generally, we allot about 15 minutes for audience comments, but the board can decide to extend that time period based on.
So I reviewed the agenda, and there was a code of conduct document, Article I, introduction, Article F, mental health, Article K, Board of Education. Good evening. I want to first start by saying how disappointed I am with the lack of professionalism. When I stood up here 2 weeks ago, I was not listened to or looked at by some. I find it disrespectful, and I just expect more, a lot more. Cell phones should be away. Professionalism should be adhered to. I would never be looking away or on a cell phone if one of my clients was speaking to me, never. We, the community, the taxpayers, come here to speak to you and deserve an attentive and receptive audience. I also find it unacceptable that no one followed up with me. It has been 2 weeks since my request for research on the impact of one-year transitions. Not an email, not a call, not a letter. You took the time to acquire a psychologist to discuss stress and anxiety about returning to school. Perhaps you should be acquiring a psychologist to discuss the stress and anxiety of our children being shuffled around schools every 12 to 24 months. Again, I am requesting research on one-year transitions and the impact it will have on our children. Children are resilient is not the answer I want to hear, as I've been told in the past. Furthermore, the decision to delay the Princeton plan was largely due to COVID and our children not having a normal year and the anxiety it caused. Well, here we are again. COVID has not gone away. Mask mandates and social distancing will be in place. Kids won't be able to eat lunch together, as we just learned. COVID testing and quarantines are being planned. Nothing sounds normal to me. And because of this, the Princeton plan should be placed on hold until further notice. COVID will most likely still be here in the 2022-23 school year. If my whole family, 3 children, unknowingly get exposed to COVID, I will be sending a COVID-infected child into each of the 3 elementary schools and shared buses. So now instead of 1 school or 1 class having to quarantine, 3 schools or 3 classes will have to. It is easier to contain when children of elementary age families are in the same school. It will be a contact tracing nightmare. The unknown is upon us, and until we find out what that is, we should remain with what we know, and that is our beloved Furnace Woods, FGL, and BV schools as they are.
30 seconds.
I am also still demanding a community vote on the Princeton plan. It was pushed through as an attendance policy and is nothing of the sort. Perform a community vote, please. If the majority is in favor, I will rest my case and I will accept it. I feel like everything is done in a sneaky yet strategic manner. For example, removing the public comments agenda tonight and changing the venue overnight are just a couple examples. As well as not being required to respond to our public comments. There is a disconnect that needs to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Carrasquilla. To Ms. Christensen. Next speaker is Ms. Spada.
Thank you. My question for it. The next person is Jim Martino.
My question was answered as well.
And the person there in the building.
Hi, my name is Mary Catherine Hellman, and I'm a parent in the district of an incoming kindergartner and a second grader. I just wanted to say my question was actually answered, but it's really challenging to know when you come into a meeting, if your question will be addressed. So it's really hard for me to have decided that I was going to comment, especially on an agenda item, when I came into the meeting. So that's just a little bit of feedback that I hope maybe you can take into consideration.
Thank you very much. Oftentimes there are presentations and we can actually. Thank you for your input. Thank you very much for everybody for showing up tonight. We have board comments and new business. Let's start on the other end.
The comments, just thank you for coming.
So that brings us to the end of our meeting. Can I get a motion? Second. All in favor? Our next scheduled meeting is Wednesday, September 22nd. There will be a lot of updates and. Very much.